Good afternoon. Welcome to the third in our edition of Sector Streams webinars. Today we'll be talking about responses to the COVID-19 membership survey and then related issues and the usual Q&A session with a panel. So as usual, today I'll go through how to ask questions, introduce the panel we have for you today. I'll give a short presentation on some responses to the survey, and then we'll go into the panel session. Quick one on asking questions. You'll see on your screen in the top right corner there's a little Q&A box. If you click on that, it will give you a screen to type in your questions. My colleague Anne will then be collating those and asking them to the panel. If you wanted to start doing that now, that'd be great. Then Amber's got some to look through to present to the panel when we get to that point. Please don't use the chat function next to the Q&A. We won't be looking at that, so please do use the Q&A functionality. So our panel today, we've got Caroline McParland. She's our Vice President for Scotland and from WSP, a large organisation, and Will Woodrow, our Irish Vice President from a smaller organisation. And then Sally Haynes, our Chief Exec, and myself, Jason. So to go through some of the feedback from the membership survey. So as an overview, we had just over 500 responses, generally representative of the CIEEM membership. So a bigger proportion from England, a bigger proportion from consultancies, but generally representative of the other sectors as well, local authorities, NGOs, the SNCOs, and across the UK, Ireland, and a few further afield as well. And conducted, closed about 3 weeks ago now, towards the end of April. So some of the feedback, so just quickly going to the end of the survey, we were very happy to see that most of you had looked at, or most of the respondents had looked at the web pages. If you haven't had a chance to do that, please do go and have a look at those. We're updating that on an almost daily basis, and there is a log now, so when you go in and you have a look at the landing page, it tells you exactly what's been added on what day, so you know what's changed there. And then, how do you feel about how CIEEM has responded? So pleasingly for us, most people are either very happy, the green, or happy in the blue. A little bit in terms of criticism around perhaps we were a little bit slow to react initially. Maybe we were, I suppose we were trying to work out what everything meant as well. Things were a bit confused right to start with. And we were also trying to organize our own office and get people working from home, but we'll take that feedback, thank you. If you were an employee, what has the impact of COVID, the pandemic, been on you? So for the most part, people said there had been no impact. Bearing in mind, this is nearly a month ago now, so things may have moved on, and the big pink bar on other also gave some interesting feedback as well. So some people had had their hours reduced, a few people furloughed with or without top-up, a very small number made redundant, and then a small group who'd had their pay reduced. In the other category as well, though, there were lots of people who said their roles had changed slightly, or a slight priority change, or things had been affected by others in the organisation being furloughed or made redundant, and so their workload had changed, or their role had changed slightly. And then there were also some comments around changes from outside of their organisation, where if there was subcontract, so where the work wasn't coming in, or in construction potentially slowed down. Further to that, then more responses around having to juggle caring responsibilities or living with a shielded individual. And then the other thing with this was, although the majority of people said that they hadn't been affected, there were lots of respondents to say that they expected at some point to be furloughed, either through reduced work or a planned rotation of furloughing. So it'd be interesting to see how this has changed, and we might redo this at some point. How much of your role can you do remotely? For the most part, it's either most of it or some of it, so that's really good to see. And a few people there, all of it, or none of it for a very few individuals. Your approach as an organisation to fieldwork was interesting as well. So bearing in mind that this is nearly a month ago as well, and things have moved on quite a lot, and advice and guidance has changed over that period. The biggest chunk there that had ceased all fieldwork, unsurprisingly, came out of Ireland, the Republic, and mostly England that were carrying on. But the biggest proportion there continue to do some fieldwork based on updated risk assessments for each case-by-case site. We asked about whether your organization is diversified in what it does. For the most part, people said no, but around a fifth said yes. Those who added further information to this said that was mostly around more remote sensing and using more technology, doing more desk-based work around management plans and assessments, and then doing other things like more data management jobs, electronic filing and organizing in the office, submitting data records, and then probably not in terms of their work, but a lot of comments came in this part about doing more CPD and other studies. Loss of income, vast majority said yes, there had been some impact there. What I realized when I started digging into this data though is that that potentially could be skewed because we also didn't have a I don't know or I'm not sure button here. And a lot of the comments were around, there may not have been a reduction now, but we were expecting it at some point, or that there hadn't been an effect now, but we're having less inquiries for work. So there's the potential and there we're expecting it. Business support packages, we asked about whether you thought that they were sufficient and doing what they were supposed to do. For the most part, people weren't sure, bearing in mind about a month ago as well for this. Most people responded when they had in the pre-text box around just not having had a chance to get their heads around it. So just weren't sure what was available, whether it was available, how it would work. There's also a lot in there that we'll come back to around certain parts of the sector not being supported and still not necessarily being supported, like company directors, new starters. Yes. Have you discussed how decision-making will be made in light of limited survey data? So we asked whether you'd engage with your local planning authority. For the most part, people said no. A few said yes. In the comments to this as well, there were a lot of people said they had tried to, but their local authorities were just too busy and hadn't been able to get back to them. Part of our reasoning with this question as well was about the guidance that we've literally just put out now for the UK around ecological survey and assessment in the UK, providing advice and guidance on how to undertake survey work now with the restrictions that are in place and how we can go about doing that and how that links directly back into the planning system. And we might come back to that as well in discussions. So talking about personal changes, mental health, we asked about whether there'd been an impact on mental health and well-being. It's nice to see that a big chunk of people said there's no change, but unfortunately, some people saying it's slightly worse, and a small number significantly worse. We have put some resources together. We had them even before all this started, but there's even more now. If you go onto the COVID-19 pages on our website, there is a mental health tab in those sub-pages that's got a variety of resources that you can go to that would hopefully be of help with some of that. And then, of course, also we've started a member assistance program, which hopefully provides even further assistance if you need it. And really happy to see that 70% of people there are aware of that. And hopefully by now, a lot more members are aware of that. And then that's a service that we've provided now, we actually brought forward under the circumstances. And then we asked about how we best could support you at this time. And the biggest response there was around regular updates on guidance and advice. Hopefully what we're doing, and certainly in the feedback at this point, when we did the survey, was very positive, that providing the web pages, updating them on a regular basis, having published some guidance on health and safety and now on alternative approaches to survey work. We're doing that. And the next ones were around engaging with governments on impacts on the sector. So we've been doing some of that. We can do more. And then around continuing professional development, and we're continuing to build that as a remote service now, having to change things. And then also the next sort of big one was around engaging with governments on the actual impacts to ecology and conservation. And we're starting to look at that now around the green recovery and planning for recovery and how we can do that works with biodiversity and the environment rather than against it. Lobbying government for business and financial support, we've done a little bit, can do some more on that. And then signposting to health and wellbeing, a smaller proportion, but we've got that there as well. So hopefully that's a significant resource for you. Some of the other feedback, oh no, that's the next one, around continuing to expand our webinar program over the coming months. We asked you what might be useful. So some remote sensing training came up quite a bit, writing risk assessments, transferable skills came up quite a bit with a range of things, so project management, client liaison, building relationships with clients, report writing, budgeting, crisis budgeting as well came up, and time management. A few people mentioned about upgrading their membership and applying for chartership, and we've been doing some of that. Biodiversity net gain came up quite a bit as well, and how to use the biodiversity metric, and we've also been doing that training, and I think we've put on some more as well. A few people asked about how we could do some practical skills training online. Could potentially be difficult, but it was a request of it'd be useful to look into those things. So I'm sure we can do that, particularly around identification skills, and then UK have NBC in phase 1. Legislation, the planning system, that's something I'm sure we could look at. Protected species licensing, depends on what level we're looking at for that. And then looking ahead, so what's coming down the road, what does the green recovery look like, what's in the legislation around things like the Environment Bill, Agriculture Bill, and the sort of environmental governance, and across the whole of the UK as well, and how that might work. And then we also had a few requests around things like reviews for equipment, which is an interesting one that I'm sure we can look into, around how things compare, equipment compares if you're coming, particularly if you're coming new to the sector, what's good and how other professionals rate what they're using. So that's a roundup of the feedback from the survey. Thank you very much if you did respond to it. And we'll go back into the Q&A with the panel now. So we'll bring in Amber. If I just stop my screen, you should be able to see the panel again now.
Thank you, Jason. So the first few questions are related to the alternative purchase guidance. The first one's for Will, asking when are we likely to get the equivalent guidance on alternative approaches for Ireland?
Well, we've been drafting that guidance over the last couple of weeks, and the people who've been writing sections on that which have been for bats, birds, badgers, habitats, smooth newts, a lot of it based on an updating, if you like, or amendments to the one that's been done for the UK. Those changes have been made, and as of this afternoon, that's going to the Ireland Policy Group. Once they've had a look through it and it's been sort of passed and okayed through there, then we expect to be making that available, and we're hoping, the intention is for that to be available early next week.
Thanks, Will. And we've got another question on the alternative approaches for Sally. Will CIEEM be adding further taxa to the CIEEM alternative approaches guidance?
Yes, we very much hope so. So what we published last week is version 1. We'll be producing a version 2 with a few updates or amendments, but we're also looking to add additional taxa. We've got a volunteer working on invertebrates and also on freshwater pearl mussel, and we're seeking volunteers to help us with other taxa such as otter, red squirrel, pine marten, wildcat, reptiles, and so on. So if you either can help to contribute to those, or you have an idea for a taxa group that you would like to produce some guidance on, please do get in touch.
Sorry, Amber, can I just come up with a bit of a further information on that from following that first question? Is that okay?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Just to highlight that the guidance that we'll be producing for Ireland will include the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. And although we don't want this to be confusing because there is UK guidance out there, the UK guidance also includes dormouse, great crested newt, water voles. Sally was just talking about wildcats. So what we don't necessarily want to do is have too many taxa included in the guidance for Northern Ireland. So we are also including Northern Ireland in the All Ireland guidance, which will be basically representative of the different and reduced number of taxa that we'll be dealing with here in Ireland.
Thanks, Will. So the next few questions are related to the lockdown restrictions. Jason, do the lockdown changes announced by the Prime Minister on Sunday change the approach to fieldwork in the UK?
I think essentially the changes that came out on Sunday and then the further document on Monday don't actually change much for England. We already had the letter from DEFRA for England around fieldwork being able to continue, provided it's using social distancing and the health and safety requirements, and we've got the guidance for that on the website and the advice now on alternative survey approaches. Important to bear in mind the differences across the countries as well. So Wales has got their guidance as well linked through the website, and Northern Ireland, Scotland as well. We haven't had a direct response from Scottish Government, but we have updated our guidance on there, which is in line with what we've had in terms of some feedback from Scottish Natural Heritage. So yeah, different across the countries. I don't think Sunday's announcement changed much really.
Okay. Sally, is CIEEM planning to produce guidance or advice on habitat site management?
Yes, we've got a small group of members who are looking at that. I think it's very important that we don't duplicate other advice and guidance that is out there and or is being prepared. So we're also talking to some other, for example, environmental NGOs about what advice, additional advice or guidance from CIEEM might be useful. Some of what we've already provided in relation to ecological survey and assessment will also apply to approaches to habitat site management approaches as well. But clearly there are some different issues, but we're looking to see whether there's a gap that we can usefully fill. And also it's worth perhaps just bearing in mind that the other area that needs support is for higher education institutes and student fieldwork and research. And the Academia Special Interest Group, I know, have been meeting together to share ideas and experiences about how that can be facilitated both from a virtual learning perspective, but then also from safe ways of reintroducing field-based activities going forwards.
Great, thank you, Sally. Caroline, has CIEEM had any clarification on the approach to fieldwork in Scotland from Scottish Government or SNH?
Not directly from Scottish Government, as Jason mentioned. The guidance from SNH is in essence under their planning pages, and really the direction there is to discuss fieldwork and the need for it on a case-by-case basis. And that's based on what data you've already got available and how important your species interest is. The one piece of advice we've had from Scottish Government on their planning FAQs is that there's no presumption that there'll be any reduction in the levels of protection afforded to the likes of European protected species. And they have said that there won't be any suspensive conditions. So, for example, you know, for European protected species, you can't have suspensive conditions. In other words, you know, if you need to have data, you can't put that in as a planning condition that you'll collect the data later. But in essence, the direction is to follow the guidance around whether or not your work is essential, and then discuss your data requirements and alternatives with SNH on a case-by-case basis. And that's the summary of the advice that we've had at the moment.
Thank you, Caroline.
Okay.
Will there be any guidance for members in Ireland as movement restrictions are being eased on Monday the 18th?
Well, the guidance that we've got on the CIEEM webpage will be continually updated. As you know, what's happening in Ireland is that we'll have a staged series of easing of restrictions, principally starting on Monday the 18th, where outdoor workers will be allowed to resume, and there is guidance now. We have information relating to that on the CIEEM website now, and then 2 weeks after that. That's first of all that specifically relates to outdoor workers, and the advice is that outdoor ecological work can commence then, where we can be certain to keep social distancing and everything in place. Certainly, as restrictions are increasingly eased, there are things coming out from government, such as requirements for employers to provide inductions to their staff on COVID-19, and actually requirements for potentially signed statements of acknowledgement of issues, and certainly we'll be updating those as they develop, and they will be developing over the next few weeks.
Great, thank you. So the next question is for Sally. Do you have any plans for a future online conference and online training?
Oh yes, so we're hoping to be running a summer conference in July, which is a collaboration between the Ecological Restoration and Habitat Creation Special Interest Group and our Action 2030 working group, and that's going to be around action to address the climate emergency and biodiversity crisis, including action we can take organisationally, but also making use of nature-based solutions, the most effective nature-based solutions. So that would be an online conference. We're also looking at the planned Scottish and Welsh conferences that were scheduled for September and October, and they potentially will become online conferences as well. In terms of training, so we have, as you know, most of our training is either classroom based or field based. We have been able to convert 2 training courses, the Biodiversity Metric course and the Biodiversity Net Gain training course, to online training, and they're going very well. And my thanks to the trainers for adapting so quickly. We are also looking at increasing our the number of courses that we provide online, not just during this period, but potentially going forward. Now, it was interesting to see the list of proposed sort of topics. A number of those are ones that we are looking at. I think we've just got to be mindful that for many of our trainers who are used to delivering face-to-face training, there's new skills to be learnt in terms of delivering online training. So we need to support them in developing online training courses, which typically are delivered in modules over several days as opposed to all in one day. But we're also in the process of procuring a new learning management platform, which is going to enable us to deliver online training courses more effectively. So I guess the answer is yes, we are looking to develop online training. It will take a little time to get those courses up and running. But we envisage this as something we'll be able to offer going forwards as part of a blended learning programme.
Great, thank you. So I've only got one question left for Caroline, and this is more about the recovery from COVID-19. What temporary measures, including measures taken as people come out of lockdown, could be made permanent? For example, cycle routes, more train carriages.
Yes, so this is something that certainly we have been thinking about, and other bodies have already been talking about as well. And you mentioned cycle routes, for example. You know, a lot of the temporary cycle routes that people are using could be made permanent. There could and potentially should be a shift towards cycling and increased capacity on trains and buses, not just to allow for safe social distancing, but also to encourage more people to use those forms of transport instead of their cars. If you look at some of the images we're seeing about improved air quality around the world, because no one's driving around under lockdown, that's obviously a very positive thing at the moment, and it's something that we want to perhaps think about going forward. Can we make some of those changes longer term and more permanent? In Scotland, we've got a target of net zero carbon by 2045, and some of the ideas around changing development, changing transport infrastructure, including using green infrastructure more, are already being discussed as part of Scotland's National Planning Framework version 4 that's in the process of being updated. And the government had lots of workshops around that just before lockdown. So those ideas are already being talked about, and I think some of the temporary measures like cycle lanes and so could begin to be made permanent, perhaps a bit more quickly than might otherwise have happened. I suppose that's a silver lining to think about as we continue through the current crisis.
Thank you. So that's no more questions have come in, so I think that's everything from me.
Okay. I was going to say, I think it's worth adding that we've got a working group as well on planning for recovery, so we're starting to think about those kinds of things as well within the Institute and how that might work. And a blog, I'm not sure if it was this week or last week, our president has written on the website around green recovery as well, so it's worth going and having a look at that.
Sorry, Jason, it's possibly also just worth mentioning that that will be a feature of our autumn conference at towards the end of the year as well.
That's great. Okay. Well, thank you very much for the questions. Thank you to Amber. Go back to screen quickly. Yeah, so thank you very much for joining us today. I hope that's been useful to you. Thank you for your questions. Obviously, this will be recorded like with the previous episodes of Sector Stream, so it'll be available to you on the Resource Hub. We certainly welcome your feedback, whether you found this useful and ways we could potentially improve it. And also suggestions for future topics would be really grateful for those. If you could send those all to inquiries@cieem.net, that would be great. And thank you very much to the panel. Thank you very much for you as participants. And thank you very much to Amber for her support in the background. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.